Welcome to the thefogvlog.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Easy Does It. Today we are talking about cakes and specifically talking about Flavor West yellow cake. And we're going to go through, like we always go through, we're going to go through market share, notes, application, and recipes it's used in. So I'm going to hand over to Liam. He's going to talk about market share, and yeah, we'll carry on from there.
Hi guys. The Flavor West yellow cake market share, it's going on ELR. It's the number one used yellow cake. It's used in 64,864 recipes. I had to actually check that number twice just to make sure I was seeing it right. The next used cake then is Capello yellow cake. That's 6,430. Then we go on to Jungle Flavors yellow, 2,828. Purilium yellow cake at 223. And then one-on-one flavors yellow cake at 190. The Flavor West yellow cake on ELR is used at a median mix of 1.5%, which gives you an average of 2.2%. Now, looking at all the flavors, it's used in 3,393 recipes, used at an average of 1.78%. Then the next used flavor then is Jungle Flavors yellow cake at 945, Capello yellow cake at 400, Nicotine River yellow cake at 13, and Purilium yellow cake at 12. Just out of curiosity, I actually typed in cake just to see what come up as the most used cake on ELR. And the most used cake, if you class cheesecake, is actually TFA graham cracker. Then it goes on to New York cheesecake. And then the very next used cake then is Capella cake batter after the Flavor West yellow cake. Capella cake batter is it's used in 36,326 recipes. And that's it for the market share.
Cool. Yeah, exactly the same on ELR and ATF then, right? So yellow cake first, and then right after that is cake batter, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite a difference between the two. I think I haven't, either I've used it before, cake batter, in a recipe a long time ago, but I haven't done any single flavor testing on it, so I'm not going to try and compare those two. I did, however, do some single flavor testing on yellow cake. I mix it up at 1% to start with, and some of the notes in there is the first things that stood out for me was the sweet, buttery, and smoothness from it. Okay, it felt like quite a low note and rather flat, just a single note thing, at 1%. But the only thing where there was a little bit of dimension in that was the roundness that I was getting from the butter or the butteriness in there. The cake vibe is already there at 1%, but it's not that prominent at all. So I can see people using it at 1% to thicken things up, like milkshakes, or just like a buttery kind of accent and something, right? So there's definitely applications for it at 1%. At 2%, it felt like a completely different vape. It felt like I was vaping something completely different. Just that cake flavor just bursts right through. Then the buttery notes are still there. That roundness from the buttery smoothness still there, but it felt like it wasn't as prominent anymore. So that the cake was sort of in the middle, and it was just in the back and at the bottom of it, you could feel that roundness from the butter just supporting that cake flavor. And that's what I think this this concentrate is for, is at about 2%. That's what it needs to be used at. Still very smooth, creamy, and buttery. So yeah, I would recommend using it at 2%. if you are using it at 2%, though, it's going to be a main note or prominent note in your mix. Of course, depending on the rest of the recipe, but if you're going to be putting this in at 2% and you don't crank all the other flavors, this is going to be a main note, and then it's extremely delicious. I haven't touched it for a while, and I'm reminded that this was the first yellow cake, or excuse me, this was the first cake concentrate that I found when I started out that really tasted like an actual cake that I'm used to. We're back in the day where we only had to we only had a couple of flavor houses to pick from when DIY wasn't as big. I don't even think Inawera was in the mix. It was CAP, it was FA, and it was TFA. Inawera wasn't even around, and Flavor West, excuse me. And I found yellow cake, and this was the first cake concentrate that I kind of fell in love with. So I had no clue that it was the most popular cake concentrate out there, but I definitely see how you can be using this in many different ways. Richard, you've used this a couple of times before, right?
Yeah, I make just about every recipe I can find with yellow cake in it. I mean, the obvious first resort is for any sort of yellow cake. I mean, as opposed to a white cake where you've got a much less prominent flavor from the cake itself. The white cake just serves more as a textural base for whatever icing or fruit or whatever you're going to add to the cake. The yellow cake brings its own distinct flavor, and I think what the FW does so well is creating that impression of an actual baked good, an actual baked product. You've got that sort of brown, crusty, just out of the oven. It adds that kind of note into the cake flavor. It's sweet. It plays supremely well with icings, with caramels, with some fruits. I wouldn't say with all fruits, but certainly as a base for an authentic cake, FW really is the first resort for me. The big problem with it, and the reason why there are quite a number of people that don't want to use it, is of course that it contains sugars, which when vaped can pose a somewhat of a cancer risk. So quite a lot of people elect not to vape it on safety grounds, on health grounds. If that is the case, then you're probably safer going with the jungle flavors. That is supposedly the best substitute, of the best alternative to the Flavor West, without the sugars, without the health hazard. But it's not something that bothers me unduly, so Flavor West remains my go-to. It also has application as a thickener. As Theo mentioned, you can use it as in milkshakes or whatever at a lower percentage, where you're not going to get so much of that trademark cake flavor, where you're just going to use it to thicken up and to increase the mouthfeel and just increase the general density of the juice that you've got. There'll be a slight butter note. There will be a sort of creamy smooth note. But I think it's best used as, by far and away, the standout, most authentic and tasty actual cake flavor on the market. So that would be my primary application for that. Dietz, what about some of these recipes that use it?
Well, it's definitely, before I get into the recipes, I must also say it's definitely the most authentic cake concentrate there is for me. It's also the first one I got to use in terms of cake and that sponginess. Like that warm, like you mentioned, almost out of the oven, like warm kind of feeling to the cake. It's delicious. There are so many recipes on all the flavors alone. You've got 170 recipes using it. On e-liquid recipes, the number is there's a lot. I did not check the number, but I know there's so many recipes on e-liquid recipes using it. The one I personally enjoyed it in the most was Strawberry Shortcake Bar by Not Charles Manson, but it's also used in Bangin' Good Bourbon by Skittles Ninja, ABGD by Slashallow, Maple Vanilla Custard. I would actually, the most recent one I noticed was Yellow Matter Custard. That one looks like quite a good recipe, so that's also one I would recommend. Then St. Louis butter cake. That was actually the reason I got the concentrate, was because Richard was ranting and raving about it. So I figured I need this concentrate, and it was definitely not a mistake getting it. St. Louis butter cake is also one of the best recipes containing it. In terms of what it does with the recipes, you can really use it in any dessert application, from, as Richard mentioned, thickening for the milks, desserts. I've noticed it in custards, obviously, for the thickening. In cakes, it gives you that gritty texture. I would say that, like in the case of a yellow cake or 3% or higher, where it's cake, it's a very good recipe, a very good concentrate, and it's contained in very good recipes. Maybe that's why Richard's mixing all his recipes with this concentrate. I would say you need this in your stash.
Cool, guys. Is there anything else that we need to add? Richard already mentioned the fructose, which was the only other kind of thing that we had to say about this, but is there anything else that we need to add here? Nope. Right, guys, thank you so much for watching the shows. If there's any recipes or applications or notes that we didn't mention in this show, please leave it in the comments below so that if somebody clicks on the show, they can find those in the comments. But thank you so much for watching the show, and yeah, see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.